Don't drink that juice. They put something in it.
The October wind that swept through the streets of Atlanta wasn't just cold. It had a bite to it that seemed to find its way right through the thin denim material of Josie Williams' jacket. She was only 7 years old, standing there all alone outside the massive wrought iron gates of the Thorne estate. Her little hands gripped the cold metal bars, holding on tight as she peered through into a world that felt like it belonged on a different planet. If you looked down at her feet, you'd see sneakers that had walked too many miles. The heels were worn down to almost nothing, and strips of silver duct tape were the only things keeping the soles attached. To the people driving by in their luxury cars, she was probably just a shadow in the twilight, another invisible child of the city. But Josie saw things differently. She always had. Inside those imposing gates, the Autumn Harvest Gala was in full swing. It was the kind of party you only see in movies, a gathering of the city's absolute elite. There were doctors, high-powered lawyers, and business moguls, all there to celebrate the massive success of Thorne Enterprises. Crystal chandeliers had been hung from temporary silk canopies, casting a warm golden glow over the guests below. The air smelled rich, a mix of expensive perfume, roasted lamb, and old money. But when Josie took a breath, she didn't smell the food or the flowers. To her, the air smelled like sulfur. It smelled like a lie. Josie had been living on the streets for 3 months now. The foster system had labeled her difficult and unstable, but they didn't understand. They didn't know that her nightmares weren't just bad dreams. They were warnings. Her outbursts weren't tantrums. They were desperate attempts to stop bad things before they happened. Her mother, Keisha, had called it the sight. Before cancer took her away last year, Keisha had held Josie's face in her hands, looked her deep in the eye, and whispered, "Trust your spirit, baby girl. You see the truth, even when folks try to paint over it." Through the iron bars, Josie watched the man everyone called a pillar of the community, Bishop Elias Thorne. He was an older man, distinguished, with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than Josie would ever see in her entire life. He was smiling, shaking hands, playing the part of the benevolent leader perfectly. But Josie saw something else. She saw a cold gray aura radiating off him, like smoke. He leaned in close to his eldest son, Dion, whispering something urgent that made Dion's jaw tighten. Dion looked nervous, sweating despite the cool evening air, his eyes darting toward the center of the patio. And there, standing under the softest, most flattering light, was Kendrick Thorne. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a kindness in his face that seemed completely out of place among the sharks in suits. Next to him was his wife, Vanessa. She was heavily pregnant, glowing with that specific kind of happiness that comes from anticipation. Kendrick had his hand gently resting on her baby bump, a look of pure reverence on his face. "The twins are going to change everything," Kendrick was saying. His voice drifted on the wind, carrying all the way to where Josie stood shivering. "Pop's talking about restructuring the legacy. They'll inherit the charitable trust, the real estate. Our babies will be set for life." Vanessa smiled, reaching up to touch his cheek. "They are blessed to have you, Kendrick. You're going to be an amazing father." Josie felt a shiver run down her spine, and it had nothing to do with the cold wind. She watched as a server in a crisp white uniform approached Vanessa with a silver tray. On it sat 3 tall glasses of vibrant, fresh-pressed juice. "Your prenatal blend, Mrs. Thorne," the server said, his voice polite and practiced. Bishop Elias insisted. "Loaded with vitamins for the 3rd trimester." Josie's heart began to hammer against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked back at the shadows and saw Elias watching. His eyes were hard, predatory. She saw Dion pull out his phone, typing a message with trembling fingers, sweat beading on his forehead. And then she saw it. It wasn't something a normal person would notice. It was a shimmer, a faint, unnatural sparkle dancing on the rim and surface of the middle glass. It looked like crushed diamonds catching the light, but Josie knew it wasn't jewelry. It was death. Her mother had taught her about the dust that kills, when they were running from bad men years ago. No, Jossie whispered, her breath hitching in her throat. Vanessa reached for the glass. The shimmering death swirled in the orange liquid, invisible to everyone else. The darkness around Bishop Elias seemed to expand, swallowing the light around him. Don't drink it! The scream tore from Jossie's throat, raw and desperate. It shattered the polite hum of conversation like a dropped plate. Don't drink that juice. They put something in it. The jazz band stopped playing abruptly. 50 heads turned in unison toward the gate. Security guards, large men in dark suits with earpieces, immediately started moving toward the perimeter with aggressive steps. Get that child out of here, Elias barked, his voice losing its polished warmth instantly. She's disturbing the guests. But Jossie didn't run. She pressed her face harder against the cold bars, her eyes locking onto Kendrick. They're trying to kill your babies. Please, mister. The dust is in the juice. Kendrick froze. He looked at the terrified, dirty little girl, then back at the glass in his wife's hand. Something in Jossie's voice, a frequency of pure, unadulterated terror, struck a chord deep within him. It was a sound that couldn't be faked. Kendrick, it's just a beggar child, Dion said quickly, stepping forward to block his brother's view. Ignore her. I'll have security handle it. But Kendrick was already moving. In 3 long strides, he reached Vanessa and slapped the glass from her hand. It hit the patio stones and shattered, splashing the vibrant orange liquid across the pristine white shoes of a nearby senator. Kendrick! Vanessa gasped, clutching her stomach in shock. What are you doing? Kendrick ignored her. He ignored his father. He ignored the gasps of the crowd. He was staring at the spilled liquid. In the glow of the garden lights, the residue on the shards glittered with a faint, crystalline sheen. He looked up, his eyes meeting Jossie's through the iron bars. She knew, Kendrick whispered, the blood draining from his face until he was as pale as the moon. She knew exactly which glass. Bring her in, Kendrick commanded, his voice shaking with a sudden terrifying rage. Son, you can't be serious, Elias protested, stepping between Kendrick and the gate. She's a street rat. She's probably mentally ill. I said bring her in. Kendrick roared, the sound echoing off the mansion walls. And call Dr. Franklin. Now. As the guards opened the gate and dragged the trembling Jossie forward, Kendrick knelt down. He looked into her wide, tear-filled eyes the color of roasted coffee beans with flecks of gold. He felt the world tilt on its axis. He knew those eyes. He had dreamed of those eyes for 8 years. What is your name, child? Kendrick asked, his voice trembling. Jossie, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jossie Williams. The name hit Kendrick like a physical blow to the chest. And your mother? He choked out, barely able to breathe. What was your mother's name? Keisha, Jossie sobbed, wiping her runny nose on her dirty sleeve. Keisha Williams. She went to heaven last year. The silence that fell over the Thorne estate was heavier than the grave. It was the silence of a secret finally being screamed out loud. The grandeur of the Thorne mansion's library usually felt impressive, but tonight, it felt suffocating. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes loomed over the room, casting long shadows. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the kind that makes the air feel heavy to breathe. Jossie sat on the edge of a massive velvet armchair that swallowed her small frame. Her feet dangled inches above the intricate Persian rug, swinging nervously. She kept her jacket zipped up all the way to her chin, her small body trembling slightly, though her eyes remained alert, darting between the adults in the room like a cornered animal. Dr. Franklin, the family's private physician, stood by a portable testing kit he had hastily set up on the mahogany desk. He held a test tube containing a sample of the liquid recovered from the shattered glass. His face was pale, glistening with sweat, and his hand shook visibly as he removed his reading spectacles. Well, Kendrick demanded. He was standing protectively near Vanessa, who was seated on the leather sofa, clutching her belly with both hands, her face a mask of absolute shock. "It's arsenic," Dr. Franklin said. His voice barely a whisper, as if saying the word aloud made it more real. Highly concentrated. If Vanessa had drunk that glass, she and the twins would have been dead within the hour. It would have looked like a sudden cardiac event. No one would have suspected a thing. A collective gasp went through the room. Bishop Elias stood by the fireplace, his back straight, his face unreadable. Dion paced nervously near the window, chewing on his thumbnail, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Kendrick turned slowly toward Jaci, the little girl who had just saved his entire world. "You saved them," he said softly, his voice full of wonder. "How did you know?" "I saw the sparkle," Jaci said, her voice small but steady. "Mama told me poison sometimes looks like fairy dust. And I saw the bad man put it in." "Which man, Jaci?" Kendrick asked, his voice hardening into steel. Jaci raised a trembling finger and pointed directly at Bishop Elias. "Him. The man with the silver hair. He poured it from a little bottle in his pocket when the lady started singing." "That is a lie," Elias thundered, stepping forward with aggressive energy. "The child is clearly coached." "Kendrick, are you going to take the word of a homeless grifter over your own father? Over the bishop of this city?" "She has Keisha's eyes pop," Kendrick said, his voice breaking with emotion. "Look at her. She is the spitting image of Keisha." "Keisha was a mistake from your past," Elias spat, waving his hand dismissively. "A distraction I paid to go away." "You paid her." Kendrick stepped closer to his father, his hands balling into fists. "You told me she left me. You told me she took money and ran off with another man because she didn't want to be tied down to a church boy." "She did take the money," Elias insisted, his eyes flashing. "No," Jaci interrupted. Her voice cut through the shouting. She reached into the inner lining of her ragged jacket, struggling with a hidden pocket. "Mama didn't want the money. She wanted you." With hands that shook from cold and fear, Jaci pulled out a thick, weathered envelope. It was sealed with heavy tape and looked like it had been carried for 1,000 miles, kept safe through rain and snow. On the front, in handwriting that made Kendrick's knees buckle, was written, "For Kendrick. The truth." Kendrick took the envelope as if it were made of delicate glass. He tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside were photos, pictures of a baby Jaci, pictures of Keisha alone in a small, cramped apartment, and a letter. "Read it," Vanessa whispered, her hand gripping Kendrick's arm for support. Kendrick unfolded the paper. His voice wavered as he began to read aloud, each word feeling like a stone in his throat. "My dearest Kendrick, if you are reading this, then my fight is over, and Jaci has found you. I pray she made it safely. You need to know the truth. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because your father gave me a choice. Leave or he would destroy you." Kendrick looked up, tears streaming down his face. Elias remained stoic, his chin raised in defiance, refusing to show guilt. Kendrick continued reading, his voice gaining strength. "He told me he would ruin your reputation, have you removed from the ministry, and cut you off from your family. But that wasn't what made me run. He threatened our baby. He knew I was pregnant before I even told you. He brought papers. Kendrick. False police reports. Threats to have me arrested for extortion. He said if I didn't disappear, Jaci would be born in prison." "He's a monster," Vanessa sobbed softly, burying her face in her hands. "I took the money to protect her," the letter continued. "I used every dime to keep us safe, moving from city to city because I felt his eyes on us. But I hired a man, a private investigator, just before I got sick. Kendrick, your father isn't just controlling. He is dangerous. There is a safety deposit box at First National. The key is sewn into the hem of Jaci's jacket. It contains the proof. Proof of what he did to me, and proof of what he's done to others. Please forgive me. Save our daughter. Love, Keisha. The silence in the room was shattered by the sound of a siren in the distance, growing louder. Lies of a dying woman, Elias said coldly. She was bitter. She wanted to hurt me. Just see, Kendrick said, ignoring his father and kneeling before his daughter. Do you have the key? Jassi nodded. She fumbled with the hem of her dirty denim jacket, ripping at a loose thread with her teeth until a small silver key fell into her palm. She placed it in Kendrick's hand. This ends tonight, Kendrick said, standing up and turning to face his father. You tried to kill my wife. You tried to kill my unborn children. You stole 7 years of my daughter's life. Why, Pop? For money? For the legacy. Elias laughed, a dry, humorless sound that chilled everyone in the room. Legacy? You think this empire was built on prayers alone, boy? It was built on making hard choices. Removing weeds so the wheat could grow. Keisha was a weed. That street rat is a weed. And those twins. He looked at Vanessa's belly with open disdain. Mixed bloodlines weaken the foundation. I did what was necessary to keep the Thorn name pure and powerful. You admit it, Kendrick said, stunned by the sheer evil of the man he had called Pop his entire life. I admit that I have done what needed to be done, Elias said, adjusting his diamond cufflinks. And I will continue to do so. Who are they going to believe, Kendrick? A bishop with the ear of the governor, or a grieving son and a homeless child? They'll believe the evidence in the safety deposit box, Jassi said, her voice surprisingly strong for such a small girl. And they'll believe the camera. Elias spun around, his eyes wide. What camera? The one on the bookshelf, Jassi pointed. Mama said rich people always have secrets, so her friend gave me a recording bug. I put it there when I came in. It was a bluff, a child's desperate lie inspired by spy movies she'd seen through shop windows, but it worked. Elias's face twisted in panic. He signaled to Dion. Get the gun, Dion. Elias screamed, losing all composure. Finish this. Dion, sweating profusely, pulled a handgun from his waistband. But his hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it steady. Uncle Dion, don't, Jassi whispered, staring at him. You don't want to hurt us. I see your heart. You're scared of him too. Shut up. Elias roared. Shoot them, Dion. Shoot them all. The sirens were deafening now, screeching up the driveway. The flashing lights of police cruisers cut through the library windows, painting the room in chaotic strobes of red and blue. The library of the Thorn estate had transformed in an instant. What was once a sanctuary of knowledge and history was now a cage. The flashing red and blue lights from the police cruisers outside danced wildly across the spines of the books, creating a disorienting, strobing effect that made it hard to think. Dion stood in the center of the room, the gun in his hand wavering dangerously between Kendrick and the door. He looked like a cornered animal, sweat stinging his eyes, his breathing ragged and shallow. Dion, look at me, Kendrick said, his voice calm but authoritative. He stepped in front of Vanessa and Jassi, shielding them with his own body. You don't have to do this. I know Pop has been pulling your strings your whole life, making you feel small so he could feel big. But this? Murder? That's not you, brother. You don't know anything, Kendrick. Dion yelled, his voice cracking with hysteria. You were always the golden boy. The favorite. I was just the spare. Pop said. Pop said if I did this, the debts would go away. He said I'd finally have a seat at the table. There is no table. Kendrick shouted back, trying to break through his brother's panic. It's a slaughterhouse, Dion. He was willing to kill Vanessa. He poisoned the juice. Look at your father. Does he look like a man of God to you right now? Dion's eyes flicked to Bishop Elias. The older man was not praying. He was not repenting. He was checking his watch, calculating, his face a mask of annoyed arrogance. He looked like a CEO dealing with a minor inconvenience, not a father whose son was holding a gun. "Stop stalling, Dion," Elias snapped. "The police are outside, but we have the tunnels. We can claim self-defense. Say the street child broke in, attacked Vanessa, and Kendrick died trying to save her. We control the narrative. We always do." "He's going to shoot the floor," Jossie whispered. She was pressed tightly against Kendrick's leg, her eyes squeezed shut. Her gift was showing her the next few seconds in fractured, terrifying images. "He's gonna shoot the floor to scare us, then the bad man is gonna grab me." "Dion, put it down," Kendrick warned, bracing himself. "I can't," Dion screamed. He pointed the gun down and pulled the trigger. Bang! The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet splintered the hardwood floor inches from Kendrick's foot, sending wood chips flying. Vanessa screamed. In the ringing silence that followed, Elias lunged. He wasn't an old man in that moment. He was a desperate predator. He grabbed Jossie by the collar of her jacket, yanking her away from Kendrick with surprising strength. "Open the back door," Elias commanded, dragging Jossie backward. She kicked and screamed, her small sneakers sliding uselessly on the Persian rug. "This brat is my ticket out of here." "Let her go," Kendrick roared, charging forward. "Stay back or I snap her neck," Elias yelled, pressing a sharp silver letter opener he'd grabbed from the desk against Jossie's throat. Outside, a megaphone crackled to life, the voice amplified and commanding. "This is Detective Andre Bishop. We have the house surrounded. Come out with your hands up." "You hear that, Pop?" Kendrick hissed, freezing in place, afraid to make a sudden move. "It's over." "It's never over," Elias snarled, his eyes wild. "The Alliance protects its own." "The Alliance?" Kendrick asked, the confusion evident on his face despite the danger. "You think this is just about us?" Elias laughed, a sound devoid of sanity. He dragged Jossie toward the heavy oak doors that led to the servants' corridors. "We are part of something much bigger, boy. A network. Judges, doctors, politicians. We ensure the right bloodlines stay in power. We clean up the messes. Keisha was a mess. This child is a mess." Jossie stopped struggling. Her eyes snapped open and she looked up. Directly above the doorway Elias was backing toward hung a massive, heavy crystal chandelier. "Daddy!" Jossie shouted, the word feeling foreign but right in her mouth. "The light! Shoot the light!" Kendrick didn't hesitate. He didn't question how she knew. He looked at the gun in Dion's trembling hand. Dion looked at Kendrick, then at his father holding a knife to a 7-year-old's throat. A lifetime of abuse and manipulation finally broke in Dion's mind. Dion raised the gun. Not at Kendrick, but at the chain holding the massive chandelier. Bang! The chain shattered. The 1,000-pound fixture plummeted. Elias looked up too late. He shoved Jossie away instinctively to protect himself, but the crystal and brass cage crashed down, clipping his shoulder and pinning him to the floor in a shower of glass and sparks. "Run!" Kendrick screamed. He scooped up Jossie in one arm and grabbed Vanessa with the other, pulling them behind the heavy oak desk just as the windows imploded. SWAT team members, led by Detective Andre Bishop, breached the room. "Police! Get down! Down!" Dion dropped the gun and fell to his knees, hands on his head, sobbing uncontrollably. Elias lay pinned under the chandelier, groaning, his silver suit shredded and stained with blood. Kendrick held Jossie tight against his chest. She was shaking violently now, the adrenaline fading, leaving only fear. "I got you," he whispered into her hair. "I got you, baby girl. You're safe." Detective Bishop, a stern man with a kind face, walked over to them once the room was secured. He looked at the wreckage, then at Elias being handcuffed. "Kendrick," he said, nodding. "You okay?" "We're alive, Andre," Kendrick said, standing up and helping Vanessa. My father. He confessed. He confessed to everything. The poison, Keisha. Something called the Alliance. Detective Bishop's face darkened immediately. The Alliance? You sure he used that word? Yes, Kendrick said. Why? Because, Bishop said, lowering his voice so only Kendrick could hear, we've been chasing rumors of a group by that name for 5 years. Trafficking, murder, fraud. If your father is involved, this goes way deeper than a family dispute. Jassi tugged on Kendrick's shirt, her eyes wide. Daddy. Yes, Jassi. The bad man. He said there were others. Other kids. Her eyes were wide, seeing things far away again, things that no one else could see. I see a house in the woods. And a basement. There are kids there who are waiting for their mamas. Kendrick looked at Detective Bishop. You need to listen to her. She sees things. Bishop looked at the 7-year-old girl, then at the shattered glass of the poison juice on the patio. After tonight, kid, I'll believe anything you say. Tell me about the house. 3 weeks had passed since the night of the gala, but the aftershocks were still being felt. The scandal had rocked Atlanta and rippled across the nation. Bishop Elias Thorne, once thought to be an untouchable religious leader, was now behind bars, denied bail. Dion Thorne was in protective custody, testifying against his father in exchange for leniency. Kendrick sat in a conference room at the FBI field office. The room was sterile and white, filled with dry erase boards covered in timelines and boxes of evidence stacked against the walls. Across from him sat Agent Darius King, a specialist in organized crime who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Next to Kendrick sat Jassi. She looked different now. Her hair was braided neatly with colorful beads that clicked when she turned her head. She wore a clean, warm, puffy jacket, and her sneakers were brand new. But her eyes still held that ancient, weary depth that no 7-year-old should have. The key Jassi gave you opened a Pandora's box, Agent King said, tapping a thick file on the table with his pen. Keisha Williams was a hero, Kendrick. She didn't just investigate your father. She investigated his associates, his finances, everything. What did she find? Kendrick asked, his hand resting reassuringly on Jassi's shoulder. The Alliance wasn't just killing people, King explained, his voice grim. They were stealing them. Specifically, children. Jassi nodded slowly, staring at the table. Protective relocation, she said, using a big word she had heard in her visions. They called it that. But it was stealing. Exactly, King said, looking at Jassi with a mix of sadness and respect. When a powerful family had an inconvenient child, maybe a child born out of wedlock, a child with a disability, or a child who threatened an inheritance structure, the Alliance offered a service. They would make the child disappear. Sometimes that meant elimination. But often, it meant placing the child into a black market adoption network. Kendrick felt sick to his stomach. You mean they sold them? To wealthy families who couldn't conceive. Families who were desperate enough not to ask questions about where the babies came from, King said. They falsified birth certificates, death certificates, medical records. They erased these children's identities. My brothers and sisters, Jassi whispered. She closed her eyes, tilting her head as if listening to a distant song. There's a boy. He likes apples. He lives where the trees are tall. He dreams about me. Agent King leaned forward, his demeanor shifting from investigator to believer. Jassi, this is important. Can you see anything else about the boy? His name was Jamal, Jassi said, her brow furrowing in deep concentration. But they call him Caleb now. He was taken when he was 4. He cries at night because he forgets his mama's face. Jamal, King muttered, flipping through a thick binder of missing persons. Jamal Henderson. Missing from Chicago, 2019. Presumed a runaway. He's not a runaway, Jassi said firmly. He's in a big house. It's red. And there's a sign with a big apple on the road. Apple orchards. King stood up and walked to a map of the Pacific Northwest on the wall. Washington State? Or maybe upstate New York? Washington, Jossie said, pointing to the top left corner of the map. Where the rain never stops. King picked up his desk phone. Get me the Yakima field office. We need to cross-reference property records for Thorne subsidiaries in Apple Country. Look for a red farmhouse. He hung up and looked at Kendrick. If she's right, we might be able to find him. But Jossie, you mentioned a holding place before. A cabin? Yes, Jossie said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The transition house. Before they sell the kids, they keep them there. To make them forget. To make them stop crying. Where is it, Jossie? Kendrick asked gently. It's in the mountains, she said. Near here. I can hear the train whistle, but it's far away. And the dirt is red. North Georgia, Kendrick realized, the puzzle pieces clicking together. The old hunting lodge. Pop bought it through a shell company 10 years ago. He said it was for spiritual retreats. We never went there. Agent King was already moving, grabbing his tactical vest. We need a tactical team. If there are kids there now, we move today. Jossie hopped off her chair, clutching her new teddy bear. I'm coming. No, sweetheart, Kendrick said, kneeling down. It's dangerous. You have to stay here where it's safe. They need me, Jossie said, grabbing her father's hand with both of hers. They're scared. They won't come out for the police. The police look like the bad men. They'll come out for me. Kendrick looked at Agent King. The agent hesitated, weighing protocol against instinct, then nodded. She stays in the armored vehicle until the scene is absolutely secure. But she might be right. These kids have been brainwashed. They won't trust badges. Okay, Kendrick said, taking a deep breath and squeezing Jossie's hand. We go together. The convoy of black SUVs moved silently up the winding dirt road deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The trees were dense here, towering pines blocking out the afternoon sun and casting long, eerie shadows. Inside the command vehicle, Jossie sat strapped into a seat that was far too big for her, clutching a stuffed bear Kendrick had bought her at the hospital. It feels cold here, Jossie said, shivering despite the heating in the car. Not outside cold. Inside cold. Sad cold. We're almost there, Agent King said from the front seat, checking a monitor. Drone surveillance confirms heat signatures. 4 adults. 6 smaller signatures. Children. Kendrick squeezed Jossie's hand. You did this. You found them. You're a hero, Jossie. Not yet, Jossie said, staring out the window. Finding isn't saving. The vehicle stopped. All teams, execute, King's voice cracked over the radio. The next 10 minutes were a blur of shouting, the bang of flash grenades, and the thud of boots on wood. Kendrick covered Jossie's ears as the sounds of the raid echoed through the armored glass. Then, silence. Command, the structure is secure. Suspects in custody, the radio crackled. But we have a problem. The kids have barricaded themselves in the basement. They're armed with makeshift weapons. They're terrified. They're threatening to hurt themselves if we come in. King looked back at Kendrick. It's time. Kendrick unbuckled Jossie. You stay right behind me, he told her, his voice serious. Do not leave my side. They walked out into the crisp mountain air. The hunting lodge was a grim, windowless building that looked more like a prison than a retreat. FBI agents stood guard by the busted front door, weapons lowered but ready. They went inside. The air smelled of bleach and mold, a smell that made Kendrick gag. They descended the stairs to the basement door. A young agent stood there, looking helpless. They're screaming, sir. They think we're the cleaners. Jossie, Kendrick nodded. Jossie stepped up to the heavy metal door. She didn't yell. She knocked, a rhythmic, playful knock. Shave and a haircut. 2 bits. Go away! A young boy's voice screamed from the other side. We have knives. I don't have a knife, Jossie called out, her voice clear and melodic, cutting through the tension. I have a teddy bear. And I know about the nightmares. Silence fell on the other side of the door. My name is Jossie, she continued. My daddy is here. He's a good daddy. Not like the other ones. I know you're waiting for the butterfly. The lock clicked. The door creaked open an inch. A terrified eye peered out. It was a boy, maybe 8 years old, holding a sharpened stick. The butterfly? The boy whispered. How do you know about the butterfly? Because Jamal told me in a dream, Jossie said, stepping closer. He said you drew a butterfly on the wall so you wouldn't forget hope. The boy dropped the stick. He threw the door open and collapsed into Jossie's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Behind him, 5 other children, dirty and hollow-eyed, emerged from the shadows like ghosts. It's okay, Jossie cooed, patting the boy's back as if she were the adult. The bad men are gone. The trucks are here to take you home. Kendrick watched, tears streaming down his face. He watched his daughter, a child who had been homeless and unloved just weeks ago, become a shepherd for the lost. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was leading. Agent King stood beside Kendrick, holstering his weapon. I've seen a lot of things in 20 years, he murmured, wiping his eye. But I've never seen anything like that. She's not just a child, Kendrick whispered. She's a miracle. As the children were led out to the ambulances, wrapped in thermal blankets, the boy who had opened the door stopped and looked at Jossie. Is Jamal coming? Jamal is in Washington, Jossie said with absolute certainty. We're going to get him next. I promise. The rescue at the cabin was a victory, but it was just the beginning. The files Jossie decoded from her mother's notes, combined with the testimony of the rescued children, led the FBI to dismantle the network piece by piece. But the investigation took a darker, more complicated turn when they began looking into the adoption agencies the Alliance used. 2 months later, Kendrick and Jossie stood in the hallway of St. Jude's Hospital. They were there to meet Dr. Alicia Reynolds, a neonatologist who had been named in the files. She wasn't a monster like Elias. She was a woman who looked like she hadn't slept in a decade, haunted by her choices. When Agent King confronted her with the evidence, she didn't deny it. She just wept, her composure crumbling. They had photos of my daughter, Dr. Reynolds confessed in the interrogation room. They said if I didn't declare the babies dead, my daughter would disappear. So you told parents their newborns had died? Kendrick asked, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. You let them grieve over empty coffins? You let them bury boxes of rocks? I had no choice, she sobbed. I marked the charts stillborn. Then the Alliance took the babies out the loading dock. They went to families who paid $50,000 for a private adoption. Who is baby Jane Doe for? Agent King asked, sliding a photo across the table. That's Maya, Dr. Reynolds said, looking at the picture. She was born 3 years ago. Her mother was a teenager. The Alliance said she didn't deserve a baby. They gave Maya to the Gibsons. The Gibsons, Kendrick repeated, recognizing the name. The tech billionaires in Silicon Valley? Yes. The raid on the Gibson estate wasn't a violent one. It was a tragedy of paperwork and broken hearts. When the FBI arrived, they found Maya, now a happy, healthy 3-year-old, playing in a sandbox. The Gibsons, Paul and Sarah, were destroyed. They had no idea the adoption was illegal. They thought they had saved a child from a destitute situation. The meeting between the biological mother, a young woman named Tiana, and the adoptive parents was arranged at the FBI office. Tiana had spent 3 years mourning a dead baby. The Gibsons had spent 3 years loving a daughter. The tension in the room was unbearable. Tiana sat on one side, clutching a tissue, shaking. The Gibsons sat on the other, clutching Maya, terrified of losing her. "She's my baby," Tiana cried. "You stole her." "We didn't know," Sarah Gibson wept. "We love her. She's our life. Please." "She belongs with her mother," Kendrick said gently from the corner, though his heart broke for everyone in the room. "But she doesn't know me," Tiana whispered, looking at the little girl who was hiding her face in Sarah's neck. "If I take her now, I'm the stranger who took her away from her mommy. I'll be the monster." It was an impossible situation. Solomon's dilemma come to life. How do you fix a crime without creating a new tragedy? Then, Jossie walked into the center of the room. She was holding a box of crayons. She walked up to Maya and handed her a purple one. "Purple is for royalty," Jossie said softly. Maya took the crayon, peeking out. "I like purple." Jossie looked at Tiana, then at Sarah. "A tree can have two roots," she said. "If you cut one root, the tree falls. If you dig up the other root, the tree dies. You have to let the tree grow." "What are you saying, baby?" Tiana asked, looking at this strange wise child. "You don't subtract," Jossie said simply. "You add. Maya needs her real mama. But she loves her other mama too. Why can't she have both? Love makes the family bigger, not smaller." The adult stared at her. It was radical. It was legally messy. But it was the only thing that made sense. "An open arrangement," Kendrick suggested, catching Jossie's drift. "Full custody returns to Tiana gradually. But the Gibsons remain involved as godparents, as family. You support Tiana financially. You help her raise the daughter you both love." Sarah Gibson looked at Tiana. "We would do anything for her. Anything to keep her in our lives." Tiana looked at her daughter, then at the woman who had raised her. She took a deep breath. "I missed her first steps," Tiana said. "I don't want to miss anything else. But I don't want her to hurt." Tiana reached out her hand. Sarah hesitated, then took it. "Expanded family," Jossie nodded, satisfied. "That's the way." As the months turned into a year, the scope of the alliance was fully revealed. It wasn't just Atlanta. It wasn't just America. The Thorn Ministries had chapters in London, Lagos, and Rio. The network of stolen children and silenced heirs spanned the globe. Jossie turned 8. She was attending a private school now, excelling in art and history, though she still had moments where she would freeze in class, her eyes losing focus as she saw something happening halfway across the world. Kendrick had liquidated Thorn Enterprises. He sold the mansions, the jets, the stocks. Every penny of the blood money was put into a new organization, the Thorn Family Hope Foundation. Their mission was twofold: find the missing children and support the families, both biological and adoptive, through the trauma of reunification. They hired psychologists, lawyers, and investigators, creating a safety net for the victims. One evening, Kendrick found Jossie in his study, looking at a large world map on the wall. She had placed pushpins in various countries. "What are these, Jossie?" he asked, walking over to her. "These are the lights," she said. "Every time we find a kid, a light turns on." "We've found 42 children so far," Kendrick said, kissing the top of her head. "That's a lot of light." "There are more," Jossie said, pointing to Brazil. "There's a girl there. She speaks Portuguese, but she sings songs in English she doesn't understand. She's waiting." "We're working with the Brazilian authorities," Kendrick assured her. "Agent King is flying down there next week." "Daddy," Jossie said, turning to look at him. "Are you happy?" Kendrick paused. He looked at the photo of Vanessa and the twins, now healthy toddlers, on his desk. He thought about the weight he had carried, the realization that his privilege was built on crimes. He looked at Jossie. "I am. But I'm also sorry." Sorry that you had to see the ugly parts of the world so young. You shouldn't have to carry this. The ugly parts make the beautiful parts shine brighter, Josie said wisely. Like the stars. You can't see them when the sun is out. The phone rang. It was a representative from the United Nations. They wanted Josie to speak at a summit on child trafficking in Geneva. They wanted to hear from the girl who broke the code, the child who saw the truth. Do you want to go? Kendrick asked after hanging up. Josie thought about it. Will it help the girl in Brazil? It might. It will tell the world to look for her. Then I'll go, she said. But I'm wearing my sneakers. The ones with the tape. You don't have those anymore, baby, Kendrick laughed softly. We bought you new ones. Those old ones were falling apart. I kept them, Josie smiled. I hid them in my closet. To remember where I stood. And to remember that even when your shoes are broken, you can still stand tall. Kendrick looked at his daughter, amazed. She understood things about identity and resilience that most adults spent a lifetime trying to grasp. Okay, he said. You wear the sneakers. And we'll tell the world your story. 2 years had passed since that terrifying night at the gate, and if you stood in front of the Thorne estate now, you wouldn't recognize it. The towering iron bars were still there, but the gate was wide open, painted a welcoming shade of soft bronze instead of the imposing black it used to be. The mansion itself, once a fortress of secrets and exclusion, had undergone a complete soul transplant. It was no longer just a house for the rich. It was the headquarters for the Thorne Family Hope Foundation. But the biggest change was the garden. The very patio where the poisoned glass had shattered was now a vibrant, living playground. It was a warm, golden spring afternoon in Atlanta. Josie, who was 9 years old now, stood in the center of the garden, letting the sun warm her face. The air didn't smell like sulfur or lies anymore. It smelled of damp earth, blooming milkweed, and sweet nectar. The landscape had been redesigned specifically to attract butterflies. Hundreds of bright purple coneflowers, orange lantana, and yellow daisies swayed in the gentle breeze. Vanessa sat on a wooden bench nearby, a look of pure contentment on her face as she watched the twins, Malik and Mia. They were toddlers now, steady on their feet and full of endless energy. They were chasing a large yellow swallowtail butterfly, giggling as it dipped and weaved just out of their reach. Careful now, Vanessa laughed, her voice light and free. Gentle hands. Babies. We look, we don't grab. Kendrick walked out onto the patio, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. He looked older. His hair dusted with a bit more gray at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But his eyes were clear. The heavy shadow that had hung over him for his entire life, the weight of his father's sins, was finally gone. He handed a glass to Josie. You ready for the ceremony? He asked softly. Yeah, Josie said, taking a sip. Is grandfather coming? Kendrick shook his head slowly. Elias Thorne was currently serving 3 consecutive life sentences in a federal penitentiary. The empire he had built on blood had crumbled, but from the rubble, something real was being built. No, Kendrick said. But someone else is. Josie looked toward the side of the house. Walking toward them, carrying a tray of gardening tools, was Dion. He looked nothing like the sweating, terrified man who had held a gun in the library. He was wearing stained work clothes, sturdy boots, and a baseball cap. He had served 2 years in prison for his role in the conspiracy and was now out on parole. As part of his penance and his healing, he worked on the foundation's maintenance crew. Hey, Uncle Dion, Josie called out, waving. Dion stopped. He wiped his dirty hands on his pants, looking humbled. He still struggled to make eye contact, the guilt of the past still a heavy coat he wore, but he was trying. Hey, Josie, Dion said, a small tentative smile breaking through. Garden looks good today. The weeds are gone. It does, Josie said, stepping closer to him. The roots are deep now. The bad stuff can't grow back if we keep watching. Dion nodded, his eyes misty. I'm keeping watch, Jassy. I promise. I'm pulling every weed I see. They walked together toward the far end of the property, to a small quiet grove shaded by ancient oak trees. In the center stood a simple, beautiful headstone made of pink granite. It read, Keisha Williams, Mother, Truth Teller, Angel. A crowd had already gathered there. It wasn't the elite socialites of Atlanta anymore. It was a tapestry of survivors. Agent King was there, wearing a relaxed polo shirt instead of his tactical vest. Detective Bishop stood next to him. The Gibsons were there, holding hands with Tiana, and little Maya was dancing between them, loved by two mothers. Jamal, who now went by Caleb, was there with his biological parents, holding a basket of fresh apples from Washington. There were dozens of families, all of them pieced back together like kintsugi pottery, broken, but repaired with gold, making them stronger and more beautiful in the broken places. Jassy stepped up to the small microphone stand. She was small, but her presence filled the clearing. She adjusted the mic, took a deep breath, and looked out at the faces of the people she had helped save. My mama used to tell me stories, Jassy began, her voice steady and rhythmic, carrying over the crowd like a song. She said that fear is a wall, but love is a gate. For a long time this family, this house, built walls. Big, high walls to keep people out. To keep secrets in. To keep the truth hidden in the dark. She paused, looking down at her mother's grave, then up at Kendrick. But walls crumble, she continued. Gates open. We opened the gate. We let the light in. She reached into a small ventilated box resting on the podium. The crowd went silent, leaning in. Slowly, carefully, Jassy pulled out a monarch butterfly that had just emerged from its chrysalis in the Foundation Science Lab. It was fragile, vibrant orange and black, its wings trembling as they felt the air for the first time. People think being safe means getting rid of everyone different from you, Jassy said, her voice soft but powerful. They think safety is locking the door. But my mama taught me that being safe means having so many people who love you that the bad things can't get through. It means building a garden, not a fortress. She opened her hands flat. The butterfly sat on her palm for a long moment, vibrating its wings, testing its strength. The wind caught it. It lifted off, a flash of color against the green trees. It circled Keisha's grave once, as if saying hello, and then soared up into the infinite blue sky, flying higher and higher until it was just a speck of hope against the sun. Fly free, Jassy whispered, a tear tracing a clean line down her cheek. Kendrick stepped up and wrapped his arm around his daughter's shoulders, pulling her close. She's watching, you know. She saw that. I know, Jassy said, leaning into his warmth. She never left. She lives in the garden now. The ceremony ended with hugs and laughter, the sound of people who had been given a second chance. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, Kendrick and Jassy walked back toward the main house. So what's next, Jassy? Kendrick asked, looking down at her. We've saved the kids. We've built the foundation. We changed the laws. What does Jassy Williams do now? Jassy stopped walking. She looked at her father, her eyes sparkling with that familiar, otherworldly knowing that had saved them all. She thought about the tape-covered sneaker she kept hidden in her dresser drawer upstairs, a reminder of the cold concrete and the hunger. Then she looked down at her sturdy new boots, standing firmly on the grass of her home. Now, she smiled, and it was a smile that reached all the way to her soul. Now we help the next one. And the one after that. Until every lost child finds their way home. Until there are no more secrets. She reached out and took Kendrick's hand. Then she reached out and took Vanessa's hand as she approached with the twins. Together, they formed a chain, unbroken, strong, and full of love. They turned and walked back toward the house, which was no longer a place of shadows, but a beacon of light shining bright for the whole world to see. If you like the story, please subscribe and hit the like button. Thanks for watching.